The summer heat of 1882 bore down on Shoshone City, Idaho Territory, with such ferocity that the dusty main street shimmered like water, and Willa Garrett felt her vision blur at the edges as she clutched her basket tighter against her swollen belly. She had been standing in the market for what felt like hours, trying to trade the few eggs she had left for flour, but the heat and the weight of 6 months of pregnancy were finally too much for her young body to bear. The world tilted sideways, her knees buckled, and the last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was the sound of eggs crashing against the wooden planks of the market stall. When consciousness began to return, Willa became aware of strong arms beneath her, cradling her against a solid chest that smelled of leather and pine. Her eyelids fluttered open to see a concerned face above her, all sharp angles and sun-weathered skin, framed by dark hair that fell just past his collar. The man carrying her had eyes the color of storm clouds, and they were fixed on the road ahead with singular determination. "Put me down," Willa managed weakly, though her protest lacked any real force. "I can walk." "Like hell you can," the man said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through his chest. "You just collapsed in the middle of the market. I am taking you somewhere you can rest properly." "I do not need your help, stranger. I have my own place." Even as she said it, Willa knew it was a lie. She had been sleeping in a tiny room above the saloon, trading whatever work she could manage for rent, but calling it her own place was generous at best. The man glanced down at her, and something in his expression told her he saw right through her words. "You are burning up with fever. You are clearly malnourished, and you just fainted in 90-degree heat while carrying a child. Where exactly is this place of yours?" Willa turned her face away, unwilling to answer. She felt tears prick at her eyes, furious with herself for this weakness, for letting anyone see her like this. She had been doing fine on her own for the past 3 months, ever since her husband Thomas had been killed in a mining accident up in the Silver City district. She had made it this far without charity, without pity, and she was not about to start accepting it now. The man carrying her turned down a side street, and Willa realized they were heading out of town toward the ranches that dotted the valley beyond. "Where are you taking me?" "My ranch. It is about 2 miles out near the creek." "I cannot go to your ranch. People will talk." "I have a reputation to consider." Even as she said it, Willa knew how absurd it sounded. What reputation did a pregnant widow living above a saloon have to protect? "People in this town have been talking about you for weeks," the man said bluntly. "They talk about how Thomas Garrett's widow is too proud to accept help, how you are working yourself to death trying to survive on your own. Well, I am tired of watching it happen. You collapsed right in front of me, and I will be damned if I am going to leave you to die in some rented room where nobody will find you until it is too late." His words stung because they were true. Willa had been barely surviving, and she knew it. Every day was a struggle to find enough food, enough work, enough energy to keep going. But accepting help from this stranger felt like admitting defeat, like giving up on the independence she had fought so hard to maintain. "I do not even know your name," she said finally. "Ashton Xavier. I own the Double X Ranch, raise cattle and horses mostly. Been here about 5 years now, came out from Missouri after the war. The war ended 17 years ago. You do not look old enough to have fought in it." For the first time, Ashton's stern expression softened slightly into something that might have been a smile. "I did not say I fought in it. My father did though. Lost him at Shiloh. My mother brought me and my sister out here afterward, looking for a fresh start. She passed 2 years ago, and my sister married a merchant in Boise City last spring." Willa processed this information, trying to understand why this man would care about her plight. "Why are you helping me? You do not know me. I knew your husband, not well but enough to know he was a good man. And I have seen you around town these past months, watching you try to hold your head high while everything falls apart around you. I respect that kind of strength, but strength without sense is just stubbornness. You need help, whether you want to admit it or not. They had left the main part of town behind now, following a well-worn dirt road that curved along Shoshone Creek. The water glittered in the afternoon sun, and cottonwood trees provided patches of blessed shade. Despite her reservations, Willa felt herself relaxing slightly in Ashton's arms. She was so tired, tired of fighting, tired of pretending she had everything under control when she so clearly did not. The Double X Ranch came into view as they crested a small hill. It was not the largest spread Willa had seen, but it was well-maintained and prosperous-looking. A two-story house with a wide porch sat at the center, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone was inside preparing food, and the sight made Willa's stomach clench with hunger. Ashton carried her up the porch steps and kicked the door open with his boot. "Martha," he called out, "I need you." An older woman emerged from what appeared to be the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp blue eyes that took in the situation immediately. "Lord have mercy, what happened?" Found her collapsed at the market. "She is burning up and half-starved. Can you prepare the guest room?" Martha was already moving, bustling down the hallway. "Bring her this way. I will get her settled and fetch some cool water. That poor child looks ready to expire." Ashton followed Martha into a comfortable bedroom on the ground floor. The bed was covered with a colorful quilt, and lace curtains filtered the harsh sunlight into something gentler. He laid Willa down carefully, and she immediately tried to sit up. "I really cannot stay here. This is not appropriate." Ashton put a firm hand on her shoulder, keeping her in place. "You are staying here." The certainty in his voice left no room for argument. Willa looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motive, but all she saw was genuine concern. It had been so long since anyone had cared about her well-being that she found herself blinking back tears again. Martha returned with a basin of cool water and several cloths. "Mr. Xavier, you let me tend to her now. This is women's work. You go on and see to the evening chores." Ashton hesitated, then nodded. He looked down at Willa one more time. "You rest. We will talk more after you have eaten and slept." After he left, Martha set about removing Willa's dust-covered dress and shoes, clucking her tongue at how thin the younger woman had become. "Child, you are nothing but bones and that baby. When was the last time you had a proper meal?" "I eat," Willa said defensively. "Eating and having a proper meal are two different things. I can tell just by looking at you that you have been living on scraps." Martha dipped a cloth in the cool water and began wiping Willa's face and arms, bringing her temperature down. "Mr. Xavier did right bringing you here. That man might seem gruff, but he has got a good heart. Cannot stand to see anyone or anything suffering if he can help it." "How long have you worked for him?" "Going on 3 years now. I do the cooking and cleaning, keep the house running smooth. My husband Frank handles most of the ranch work alongside Mr. Xavier and the few hands they keep on. We have got a small cabin out back. It is a good situation for us, and Mr. Xavier treats us fair." Martha finished her ministrations and helped Willa into a clean nightgown that must have belonged to Ashton's mother or sister. It was soft cotton, worn from many washings, and felt like heaven against Willa's skin. Once she was settled under the quilt, Martha brought her a bowl of rich beef stew and fresh bread. "I want you to eat every bite," Martha instructed. "That baby needs nourishment, and so do you." Willa ate slowly at first, her stomach unused to such rich food, but soon she was devouring the meal with desperate hunger. Martha watched with satisfaction, then brought her a glass of cool milk. "There now, that is better. You finish that milk and then get some sleep. We will see how you are feeling in the morning." As Martha left the room, pulling the door mostly closed behind her, Willa lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. She could hear muffled voices from another part of the house, probably Ashton and Martha discussing the situation. What had she gotten herself into? This man was essentially a stranger, yet here she was in his home, in his bed, accepting his charity. But what choice did she have really? Pride would not feed her baby. Stubbornness would not keep a roof over her head. She had been fooling herself thinking she could manage alone. Thomas had left her nothing when he died except debts and a baby on the way. The mining company had paid her a pittance for his death, barely enough to cover his burial. She had been slowly starving for months, too proud to ask for help, too afraid of what people would expect in return. Her hand moved to her belly, feeling the gentle swell where her child grew. For the baby's sake, if not her own, she needed to accept this help. At least for now, at least until she could figure out a better plan. Sleep claimed her before she could think any further, pulled down into darkness by exhaustion and the first real comfort she had known in months. When Willa woke, the room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight coming through the curtains. She lay still for a moment, disoriented before remembering where she was. The house was quiet, and when she pushed herself up to sit, her head felt clearer than it had in weeks. The fever had broken, and while she still felt weak, it was the weakness of hunger and exhaustion rather than illness. She got out of bed carefully, testing her legs. They held her weight, though they trembled slightly. Making her way to the door, she opened it and peered into the hallway. A lamp burned low on a table near what appeared to be the main living area, and she could hear the soft sounds of someone moving around. Following the light, Willa found herself in a large, comfortable room with heavy wooden furniture and a stone fireplace. Ashton sat in an armchair near the dying fire, reading a book by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, setting the book aside immediately. "You should be resting." "I have been resting." "What time is it?" "Just past midnight. You slept for about 8 hours." Willa moved further into the room, suddenly aware of how intimate this felt, being alone with him in the quiet house wearing only a nightgown. But Ashton's expression remained respectful, his eyes never straying from her face. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for helping me today. I know I was not very gracious about it." "You do not need to thank me. I did what anyone decent would do." "That is not true, and you know it. Most people in town have been content to watch me struggle. Some even seemed to enjoy it, like they thought I deserved it for some reason." Ashton's jaw tightened. There are small-minded people everywhere. They judge what they do not understand. A young woman alone, trying to survive in a hard world that makes them uncomfortable. Easier to look away or blame you for your circumstances than to actually help. You did not look away. "No, I did not." They stood in silence for a moment, and Willa felt something shift between them, some understanding passing wordlessly. This man was different from anyone she had known before. Thomas had been kind but simple, a dreamer who chased silver and gold with more hope than sense. He had loved her in his way, but they had married young, almost children themselves, and their relationship had been more companionship than passion. Ashton Xavier was something else entirely. There was a depth to him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with physical power and everything to do with character. He looked at her like she mattered, like her struggles were important, and it had been so long since anyone had looked at her that way. "You can stay here as long as you need," Ashton said, breaking the silence. I have plenty of room, and Martha can use help around the house if you are feeling up to it eventually. Nothing strenuous, just light work. Consider it an exchange if that makes it easier for your pride to accept. I cannot impose on you indefinitely. You are not imposing, I am offering. There is a difference. Willa wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the baby move inside her. People will talk. They will assume things. Let them talk. Anyone who knows me knows I would not take advantage of a woman in your situation. And anyone who does not know me well enough to know that, well, their opinion does not matter much to me anyway. You are very sure of yourself. I know who I am and what I stand for. That gives a man certainty. Willa found herself almost smiling. I suppose it does. She paused, then added, I should get back to bed. The baby seems to think nighttime is the best time to practice acrobatics. How far along are you? 6 months. The baby should come in late October or early November. Ashton nodded, his expression thoughtful. That gives us plenty of time to get you healthy and strong again. You will need your strength for what is coming. The way he said, us, made something flutter in Willa's chest, something she had not felt in a long time. She pushed the feeling away, telling herself not to be foolish. This man was helping her out of decency, nothing more. She should not read anything else into it. Good night, Mr. Xavier. Ashton, if you are going to be staying here, we should probably use first names. Good night, Ashton. Good night, Willa. She made her way back to the bedroom, but sleep was a long time coming. Her mind kept replaying the conversation, kept seeing the way Ashton had looked at her with those storm-gray eyes. She told herself firmly that she was being ridiculous, that pregnancy was making her emotional and irrational. But deep down, in a place she was not quite ready to acknowledge, she knew something had started today that would change everything. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Willa's health improved rapidly with proper food and rest. Martha proved to be a godsend, treating Willa like the daughter she had never had, teaching her better ways to cook and manage a household. Willa insisted on helping where she could, taking over lighter tasks like mending, preparing vegetables, and keeping the house tidy. Ashton was often out working the ranch from dawn until dusk, but he always made time to check on Willa, asking about her health and whether she needed anything. They began having dinner together each evening, and Willa found herself looking forward to these meals more than she cared to admit. Ashton was well-read and thoughtful, and their conversations ranged from books to politics to the challenges of life in Idaho Territory. She learned that he was 26, 4 years older than herself, and that he had built his ranch from nothing through sheer determination and hard work. He spoke little of his time before Idaho, but Willa gathered that losing his father in the war had shaped him profoundly, teaching him the value of self-reliance and careful planning. My father was a dreamer, like your Thomas, Ashton told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. He believed in causes and grand ideals, got himself killed for the Union, left my mother with 2 children and nothing but debts. I swore I would never be like that, never chase dreams at the expense of reality. Thomas was a dreamer, Willa agreed softly. He always believed the next mine would be the one that would make us rich. I tried to tell him we had enough, that we should save what he earned and build something stable, but he could not help himself. The silver fever got in his blood. Do you regret marrying him? Willa considered the question carefully. No, he was good to me in his way. We were happy, or at least content. But we married so young, barely 18, and I think neither of us really knew what we wanted from life yet. If I am being honest, I think we married more because it was expected than because we were deeply in love. And now you are 22, widowed and starting over. Something like that. Ashton was quiet for a moment, then said, "You are stronger than you give yourself credit for. Most people would have given up by now, but you kept fighting." "I did not have much choice. There is always a choice." "You chose to fight. That says something about your character." Willa felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the summer evening. She was becoming increasingly aware of Ashton's presence, the way his shoulder almost touched hers as they sat on the porch steps, the warm timbre of his voice, the rare smiles that softened his serious face. She tried to tell herself these feelings were inappropriate, that she was still grieving her husband, but the truth was that Thomas had been gone for months now, and whatever grief she felt was tangled up with relief and guilt in equal measure. As summer turned toward early fall, Willa's belly grew rounder and the baby became more active. Martha helped her let out some of Ashton's sister's old dresses to accommodate her changing shape. She felt healthier than she had in months, her skin regaining color, her body filling out to a more natural weight. Ashton seemed to watch her transformation with quiet approval. Sometimes Willa would catch him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and protective, and perhaps something more. But he never said anything improper, never made any advance that would have been inappropriate given her situation. One afternoon in early September, Willa was sitting in the living room mending one of Ashton's shirts when she felt the baby kick particularly hard. She gasped and put her hand to her belly, and Ashton, who had been going over account books at the desk, immediately stood. "Are you all right? Is something wrong?" No, everything is fine. The baby is just very active today." She smiled at his concern. "Here, feel." She took his hand without thinking and placed it on her belly where the baby was moving. Ashton froze, his hand warm against the fabric of her dress, and then his eyes widened as he felt the baby kick. "That is remarkable," he said softly. "So strong already." "I know. Sometimes I think I am carrying a future boxer." Ashton left his hand there a moment longer, and Willa realized how intimate the gesture was, how close they were standing. She looked up at him, and something passed between them, something electric and undeniable. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and she realized with a start that she wanted him to. But Ashton stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should get back to these accounts. Let me know if you need anything." After he left the room, Willa sat back down, her heart racing. What was happening to her? She was 6 months pregnant with another man's child, living in a stranger's home out of charity, and she was developing feelings for him. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was undeniable. That night at dinner, the air between them felt charged with unspoken words. Martha had gone back to her cabin with Frank, leaving them alone in the big house, and the silence felt heavy with possibility. "Willa," Ashton said finally, setting down his fork. "I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered. "What is it?" "I know your situation is complicated. I know you are still dealing with losing Thomas and preparing for the baby, but I cannot keep pretending that I do not feel what I feel." "Ashton, do not. Please, let me finish." He took a deep breath. "From the moment I picked you up in that market, something changed for me. At first I told myself I was just being charitable, doing the right thing. But these past weeks, getting to know you, watching you become strong again, I have come to care for you deeply. I know this is not the right time. I know you need to focus on your health and the baby. But I wanted you to know that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would like to court you properly." Willa felt tears spring to her eyes. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know where I stand. There is no pressure, no expectations. You are safe here regardless of how you feel about me. That will not change." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I have been trying so hard not to feel anything for you. I told myself it was too soon, that I was being foolish, that my emotions were just confused because you helped me. But the truth is, I have been falling for you too. You are unlike anyone I have ever known, Ashton. You make me feel seen and valued in a way I never have before. But, he prompted gently, hearing the hesitation in her voice, but I am so scared. I am carrying another man's child. My life is in complete upheaval. I do not want you to feel obligated to take on my problems. That would not be fair to you. Willa, look at me. He waited until her eyes met his. I am not some noble martyr sacrificing himself out of duty. I am a man who has found a woman he admires and cares for deeply. The fact that you are pregnant does not change that. If anything, it makes me respect you more, seeing how hard you are fighting for your child. And that baby, when it comes, I would be honored to help raise it if you would let me. You cannot mean that. I do not say things I do not mean. I have never been one for pretty words or empty promises. When I say something, I mean it with everything I am. Willa felt something break open inside her, all the walls she had been building around her heart crumbling. She stood and moved around the table to where Ashton sat. He rose to meet her, and then his arms were around her, careful of her belly, holding her gently as she cried against his shoulder. I am so tired of being strong all the time, she whispered. I am so tired of being alone. You are not alone anymore. I promise you that. He tilted her face up and kissed her softly, a gentle brush of lips that held more promise than passion. It was a kiss that spoke of patience and understanding, of a future they could build together if they were brave enough to try. When they pulled apart, Willa felt lighter than she had in months. What do we do now? Now we take it slow. We let things develop naturally. You focus on staying healthy and preparing for the baby. I will be here every step of the way for whatever you need. The next few weeks were some of the happiest Willa had known. She and Ashton began courting in earnest, though their courtship was necessarily different given her condition. They took walks along the creek in the evening when the heat had subsided. They sat together on the porch reading aloud from books. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. Ashton was endlessly patient and respectful, never pushing for more than Willa was comfortable giving. He seemed content just to be near her, and Willa found herself falling deeper in love with him each day. Martha noticed the change in their relationship and gave her approval with a satisfied nod. About time, you two figured out what was obvious to everyone else. Mr. Xavier has been smitten since the day he brought you here. Was I really that obvious, child? You could not have been more obvious if you tried. That man lights up like a bonfire every time you walk into a room. As October arrived and Willa grew larger and more uncomfortable, Ashton became even more attentive. He arranged for the doctor from Ashton City to come out to the ranch to examine her and make sure everything was progressing well. He had Martha teach him what to do in case the baby came quickly and they could not get the doctor in time. I am not taking any chances, he told Willa when she protested that he was fussing too much. You and this baby are too important to me. One evening in mid-October, as they sat together in the living room, Willa finally voiced the question that had been bothering her. Ashton, what will people say when the baby comes and I am still living here unmarried? I have been thinking about that. He set aside the book he had been reading and turned to face her fully. Willa, I know we have not been courting for very long, but I also know my own heart. I want to marry you, not because of propriety or to save your reputation, but because I love you and I want to build a life with you. Willa's breath caught. Are you proposing? Not yet. I will do it properly when the time is right, but I wanted you to know my intentions. If you think you could see yourself married to me, then we could do it before the baby comes. That way there would be no questions or gossip. The baby would have my name and my protection from the start. That is a lot for you to take on. It is exactly what I want to take on. He moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. Willa, I am not Thomas. I am not going to chase dreams and leave you struggling. I am not going to leave you at all. What I am offering is a partnership, a real marriage built on mutual respect and love. I know you love Thomas in your way, but I also think you know that what we have is different, deeper. Tears spilled down Willa's cheeks. I do know that. What I feel for you is unlike anything I felt before. It scares me how much I love you already. Then say yes. Marry me, Willa. Let me be your husband and this baby's father. Let us build something real together. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Ashton kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Willa felt complete in a way she never had before. This was right. This was what love was supposed to feel like. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Ashton City. Martha and Frank stood as witnesses, and the few friends Ashton had in town attended to wish them well. Willa wore a simple blue dress that Martha had altered to fit her pregnant form, and Ashton wore his Sunday best. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ashton kissed her with such tenderness that Willa felt her heart might burst. They were married. She was Willa Xavier now, no longer alone, no longer struggling, but part of something bigger and better than she had ever imagined. The first few weeks of marriage were an adjustment. Ashton moved Willa's things into his bedroom, and they navigated the intimacy of sharing a space with care and patience. Given her advanced pregnancy, they kept physical intimacy limited, but the emotional intimacy they shared was profound. Ashton would lie beside her at night, his hand on her belly, talking to the baby about the ranch and the life they would have. "You are going to love it here," he would say softly. "We will teach you to ride as soon as you are big enough. You will have the whole valley to explore. And you will never doubt that you are loved and wanted." Willa would watch him with wonder, amazed that this man who owed her nothing had chosen to take on not just her but her child as well. "You are going to be a wonderful father," she told him one night. "I hope so. I want to be the kind of father my own father never got the chance to be. I want to be there for every moment, every milestone. You will be. I know you will." On a cold night in early November, Willa woke to a sharp pain in her belly. At first she thought it was just the baby moving, but then another pain came, stronger this time, and she knew the baby was coming. "Ashton," she said, shaking him awake, "it is time." He was up instantly, pulling on clothes and lighting lamps. "I will get Martha and send Frank for the doctor. You just focus on breathing like the doctor taught you." The next several hours were a blur of pain and effort. Martha stayed by Willa's side, coaching her through each contraction. The doctor arrived just as things were becoming intense, and Ashton held Willa's hand through it all, murmuring encouragement and wiping her brow with a cool cloth. Finally, as dawn was breaking on November 3rd, Willa gave one last mighty push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying. The doctor held up the infant, announcing, "It is a healthy boy." Willa burst into tears as the doctor cleaned the baby and handed him to her. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and a red, angry face from crying. As soon as she held him, he quieted, his tiny eyes trying to focus on her face. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Ashton leaned over them both, his expression full of wonder. "He is perfect. Absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Willa asked. Ashton took the baby carefully, cradling him with surprising confidence for a first-time father. "Hello, son. I am your papa. I know I am not the man who gave you life, but I promise to be the man who is there for you always." Watching Ashton with her son, Willa felt overwhelming love and gratitude. This man had given her everything, safety, love, a home, and now a father for her child. She had been lost and alone just a few months ago, and now she had a family. "What should we name him?" Ashton asked. Willa had thought about this. "I would like to name him Thomas after his biological father, but give him your last name, Thomas Xavier. That way he carries both his histories." "Thomas Xavier," Ashton repeated, testing how it sounded. "I like it. It is strong. It honors where he came from while acknowledging where he is going." After the doctor left and Martha had cleaned everything up, Ashton climbed into bed beside Willa, the baby sleeping in a cradle that Frank had built and placed beside the bed. They lay together, exhausted but happy, watching their son sleep. "Thank you," Willa said softly. "For what?" "For everything. For saving my life that day in the market, for bringing me here, for loving me when I did not think I deserved to be loved, for claiming Thomas as your own, for being exactly the man I needed. You saved me too, you know. I did not realize how empty my life was until you filled it. This house was just a building before you came. Now it is a home. We are a family now. Yes, we are. And I intend to spend every day making sure you never regret trusting me." As winter settled over Idaho territory, the little family at the Double X Ranch settled into their new life. Ashton proved to be a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings so Willa could rest, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, and generally being as involved as any mother could hope for. Willa healed quickly from the birth, and soon she was back to helping Martha around the house, though now with Thomas strapped to her back in a sling Ashton had fashioned. She found profound joy in the simple routines of keeping house and caring for her son, made sweeter by the knowledge that she was doing it all as part of a real family. Ashton's feelings for Thomas seemed to deepen daily. He never referred to the boy as anything other than his son, and as Thomas began to respond to voices and faces, it was clear the baby adored his papa. The sight of Ashton's rough rancher hands holding the tiny baby with such gentleness never failed to make Willa's heart swell. As the months passed and winter gave way to spring of 1883, the ranch prospered. Ashton hired another hand to help with the work now that he had a family to consider, wanting to spend more time at the house. He taught Willa about the ranch operations, including her in decisions, making it clear that they were partners in everything. By summer, Thomas was crawling and getting into everything, his personality emerging as curious and determined. He had Willa's green eyes but dark hair like his biological father, and Ashton's serious expressions when he was concentrating on something. One evening in July, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas play in the grass with wooden blocks Frank had carved for him, Ashton turned to Willa with a thoughtful expression. "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "Thomas is going to need brothers and sisters. I do not want him growing up alone like I did after my sister left. What do you think about having more children?" Willa felt warmth spread through her chest. They had been intimate as a married couple since she had healed from Thomas's birth, but they had not explicitly talked about more children. "I think I would love that. I always imagined having a big family." "How big?" "I do not know. 3 or 4 children maybe, enough that the house feels full but not so many that we cannot give each one proper attention." Ashton pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "That sounds perfect. Let us fill this house with love and laughter." True to his word, Willa found herself pregnant again in the fall of 1883. This pregnancy was vastly different from her first. She was healthy, well-fed, and surrounded by support. Ashton fussed over her even more than before, if that was possible, and Martha clucked around like a mother hen, making sure Willa did not overexert herself. Thomas, now a year old and walking, seemed fascinated by his mother's growing belly. Ashton would explain that there was a baby growing inside, and Thomas would pat Willa's stomach and babble at it in his toddler language. Their daughter was born in June of 1884, a much easier birth than Thomas had been. She came into the world with a lusty cry and a full head of light brown hair. They named her Alice, and she had Ashton's gray eyes from the start. Ashton was completely smitten with his daughter, holding her for hours and declaring her the most beautiful baby ever born. Watching him with Alice, Willa sometimes forgot that Thomas was not biologically his, because Ashton loved both children with equal devotion. Life at the Double X Ranch fell into a happy rhythm. Thomas grew into an active, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning about the ranch and animals. Alice was a sweet-natured baby who smiled at everyone. Willa found fulfillment in motherhood and in her partnership with Ashton, their love deepening with each passing year. In the fall of 1886, their second son was born, a boy they named William who had Willa's blonde hair and a temperament as calm as a summer lake. 3 children kept the household busy, but it was the kind of busy that filled life with meaning and joy. One evening when William was a few months old, Willa stood at the window watching Ashton play with Thomas and Alice in the yard. Martha had taken William for a bit to let Willa have a moment to herself. She thought back to that day in the market almost 5 years ago, when she had collapsed in despair, convinced her life was over. She could never have imagined then that fainting in that dusty market would lead to this. A loving husband, 3 beautiful children, a prosperous ranch, and a life filled with more happiness than she had known was possible. Ashton carrying her home that day and declaring she was staying was the best thing that had ever happened to her. As if sensing her thoughts, Ashton looked up and caught her watching. He said something to the children and came inside, finding her in the living room. "What are you thinking about?" "About how lucky I am, how lucky we are." "It is not luck, Willa, it is what we built together." "It started with luck, though. Lucky that you were at the market that day. Lucky that you were the kind of man who would help a stranger. Lucky that you saw something worth loving in a pregnant widow with nothing to offer." Ashton pulled her close. "You had everything to offer. Strength, courage, determination, and a heart bigger than you knew. I was the lucky one finding you when I did." "We are both lucky then." "Agreed. And I plan to make sure you feel that way every day for the rest of our lives." The years continued to pass in contentment. Thomas grew into a capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. He knew his biological father's story, which Willa and Ashton had told him honestly when he was old enough to understand, but he never questioned who his real father was. Ashton was Papa, the man who had been there for everything that mattered. Alice grew beautiful and spirited, with her father's serious nature balanced by her mother's warmth. She loved books and learning, and Ashton arranged for a tutor to come from Boise City to ensure she had a proper education. She never let being female stop her from learning about the ranch, often working alongside her brothers when the jobs allowed. William was the gentle soul of the family, more interested in animals than ranching, though he did his share of work. He had a gift for healing injured creatures, and Willa suspected he might become a veterinarian someday if the opportunity arose. In 1889, Willa found herself pregnant again at 31, and she and Ashton welcomed twins, 2 boys they named Samuel and Joseph. The house felt wonderfully chaotic with 5 children, ranging from infant twins to 8-year-old Thomas. Martha and Frank had become like family, their cabin a second home where the children loved to visit. Frank taught the boys woodworking and ranching skills, while Martha passed on her cooking knowledge to Alice, who showed a real talent for it. The ranch continued to prosper under Ashton's careful management. He had a reputation throughout the territory as a fair man who treated his employees well and ran an honest operation. People came from miles around to buy his cattle and horses, knowing they were getting quality animals and fair dealing. As Idaho moved toward statehood in 1890, Ashton became involved in local politics, serving on the territorial council and helping to shape the future of their region. Willa supported him in this, hosting gatherings at the ranch where local leaders would discuss the issues of the day. She had grown from the frightened young widow into a confident woman who ran her household with skill and managed the social aspects of being married to a prominent rancher with grace. One evening in the summer of 1890, as they celebrated Idaho's admission to the Union as the 43rd state, Willa and Ashton stood on their porch watching fireworks that Frank and some of the ranch hands had set up in the far pasture. Their children were scattered around the yard, watching with delight. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Willa asked. "When you carried me out of town, I told you that you were staying with me. You were so certain, so commanding. I was furious at first, but also relieved. I think part of me had been waiting for someone to be that certain, to take charge when I could not anymore. I knew the moment I picked you up that I was not going to let you go. I cannot explain it, but something told me you were meant to be mine to protect and love. Fate, maybe. Or maybe I just recognized my future when I saw it." Willa leaned into him, feeling completely content. "I love you, Ashton Xavier, more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. And I love you, Willa Xavier. You and our children are my whole world. Everything I do for this family we have built." Years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and joys. The children grew and developed their own personalities and dreams. Thomas showed natural leadership and took on more responsibility at the ranch, clearly being groomed to take it over someday. Alice eventually went away to a women's college in California, determined to become a teacher, though she promised to return to Idaho when her education was complete. William found work with a veterinarian in Boise City, learning the trade he loved. The twins grew into mirror images of each other, inseparable and full of mischief. Through it all, Willa and Ashton's love remained the foundation of everything. They still took walks by the creek in the evenings when they could steal time away. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing. They still found joy in simple moments together, even after years of marriage. In 1895, when Willa was 37 and Ashton 41, they celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary and the 13th year since that fateful day in the market. The children, now ranging from 6 to nearly 14, organized a surprise party with Martha's help. The house was filled with food, music, and laughter as friends from all over the territory came to celebrate. As Willa looked around the crowded living room, seeing her children playing with their friends, her husband talking with neighbors, the life they had built together in full display, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought of the scared, sick, pregnant woman she had been, collapsing in that market with no hope and no future. She thought of how Ashton had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice, carrying her away from despair and into a life beyond her wildest dreams. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the children were in bed, Ashton found Willa on the porch, looking up at the stars. "What are you doing out here? It is cold. Just thinking, remembering." He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and pulled her close. "Good memories, I hope." "The best memories. Ashton, do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if you had not been at that market that day?" "Sometimes, but I do not dwell on it. What matters is that I was there and I made the choice to act. Everything good in my life came from that choice." Everything good in my life came from you making that choice too. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, Willa. I was a lonely man running a ranch with no real purpose beyond survival. You gave me a reason to build something lasting, a family to love and protect. You made my life mean something. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Inside, their children slept safely. The ranch was prosperous and secure. They had love, family, purpose, and each other. As the new century approached, bringing changes and modernization to the American West, the Xavier family adapted while holding on to the values that had built their life together. The ranch incorporated new techniques and technologies, but the heart of it remained the same: hard work, fair dealing, and family. Thomas married a local girl named Sarah in 1898, bringing a daughter-in-law into the family that Willa loved immediately. They built a house on the ranch property, planning to raise their own family there. Alice returned from California with her teaching certificate and opened a school in Shoshone City, boarding at home and bringing a new generation of children the education they needed. William established himself as an excellent veterinarian and married a doctor's daughter, setting up practice in Boise City but visiting often. The twins, Samuel and Joseph, were still deciding their futures but showing interest in law and business respectively. Willa and Ashton became grandparents in 1899, when Thomas and Sarah welcomed a son, and the joy of holding her grandson made Willa feel the beautiful circle of life completing itself. She watched Ashton with his grandson and saw the same devotion he had shown to all their children, the same capacity for love that had first drawn her to him. On a warm evening in the summer of 1900, as the new century truly began, the entire Xavier family gathered at the ranch for a reunion. 3 generations filled the house and spilled out onto the porches and yard. There was food, music, laughter, and stories being shared. Willa stood slightly apart, taking it all in when Alice came to stand beside her. Now 28 and a confident woman, Alice looked at her mother with affection. "You look happy, Mama." "I am happy. I am looking at everything your father and I built together, and it fills me with such joy I can hardly contain it. You and Papa have always been my model for what marriage should be. The way you love each other, support each other, build together. That is what I want someday. You will find it, darling. When the right person comes along, you will know." "How did you know Papa was the right person?" "You married him so quickly after meeting him." Willa smiled, remembering. "I knew because of how he made me feel, not just loved, though that was part of it. He made me feel valuable, capable, worthy. He saw strength in me I did not see in myself, and he was constant. From the very first day, he was exactly who he claimed to be. That kind of steadiness, that reliability, it is precious. Your father has never once let me down, never once made me doubt his love or commitment. That is beautiful, Mama. It is real. And when you find someone who offers you that kind of solid, real love, you hold on to them with everything you have." Alice hugged her mother, and they stood together watching Ashton play with his grandson while Thomas looked on with pride. The circle of life, turning and turning, building on the foundation of love and family. As the evening drew to a close and various family members departed to their own homes, Willa and Ashton were finally alone again in the house that had seen so much life. They prepared for bed with the comfortable ease of long marriage, moving around each other with practiced familiarity. "I was thinking today about that moment in the market," Willa said as she brushed out her hair, silver now mixed with the blonde. "About you picking me up and carrying me away. I was so frightened then, so lost. I could not have imagined any of this." Ashton came up behind her, taking the brush from her hand and gently running it through her hair himself, something he had done countless times over the years. I could not have imagined it either. I just knew I could not leave you there. Something told me you were important. I was a stranger. You were my future. I just did not know it yet. She turned to face him, reaching up to touch his face. He was 46 now, his dark hair touched with gray, lines around his eyes from years of sun and wind. But to her, he was as handsome as the day he had carried her to this ranch and declared she was staying. I love you, Ashton Xavier. I have loved you for 18 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left. We have plenty of time left, he said, pulling her close. And I plan to spend every moment of it showing you that carrying you home that day was the best decision I ever made. They went to bed wrapped in each other's arms, the house quiet around them, the ranch peaceful under the stars. Outside, the land they had worked and built on stretched in all directions, a legacy for their children and grandchildren. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds rested in the certainty of their love. As Willa drifted off to sleep, she thought about the terrified, sick woman she had been, collapsing in the market, certain her life was over. She thought about the strong, stubborn man who had refused to let her give up, who had seen value in her when she could not see it herself. She thought about the family they had built, the love they had shared, the life they had created together. She had been saved that day in the market, carried away from despair by a rancher who declared she was staying. And she had stayed, building a life more wonderful than any dream. Love had found her when she least expected it, in the form of a gruff rancher with storm-gray eyes and a heart as big as the Idaho sky. The years continued to roll forward, as years do, bringing both joy and sorrow. Frank passed away in 1902, and Martha followed him 2 years later, their loss felt deeply by the entire Xavier family, who had considered them part of the family. The ranch hands who had worked for Ashton for years became like family too, several marrying and raising their own families in cabins on the property, creating a small community bonded by more than just work. Thomas and Sarah gave Willa and Ashton 4 grandchildren total, filling the ranch with the sound of children again. Alice eventually married a fellow teacher in 1903, a kind man named David who appreciated her intelligence and independence. They settled in Shoshone City and began their own family. William and his wife Emma had twins in 1904, continuing the family tradition of multiples. Samuel became a lawyer in Boise City, representing farmers and ranchers in land disputes. Joseph opened a feed and supply store in Shoshone City, becoming a respected businessman in the community. By 1910, Willa and Ashton were in their 50s, their hair mostly gray, their faces lined with years of laughter and hard work. But their love had not diminished with age. If anything, it had deepened, becoming something richer and more comfortable while still maintaining the spark of passion that had first drawn them together. They spent more time together now, with Thomas running most of the ranch operations. They would ride out to check on the cattle or sit by the creek reading together. They visited their children and growing number of grandchildren, taking joy in the expanding family tree that had started with Ashton carrying a fainting pregnant widow home from the market. One evening in 1912, exactly 30 years after that fateful day, Willa and Ashton returned to Shoshone City and stood in the market square. So much had changed. The dirt streets were paved now. Automobiles occasionally puttered past alongside horses and wagons. Electric lights were being installed throughout the town. The rough frontier settlement they had known was becoming a proper small city. But the market still stood, with some of the same vendors or their descendants selling produce and goods. Willa stood where she had collapsed all those years ago, Ashton beside her. "Right here," she said softly. "I was standing right here when the world went dark. And I was over there," Ashton pointed. "I had just finished selling some cattle and was about to head back to the ranch. I saw you start to sway and I ran. You caught me before I hit the ground. I did, and from that moment on, I never let you fall again." Willa leaned into her husband, and they stood together in the spot where their story had begun. Around them, life in Shoshone City continued, people going about their business, unaware that they were standing in a place that held such significance for the older couple. "Thank you," Willa said, "for everything, for every single day of these 30 years. The thanks go both ways. You gave me a life worth living, Willa. You gave me purpose and love and family. I was just existing before you. After you, I was truly alive." They walked back to where they had tied their horses, moving slower than they once had but still comfortable in the saddle. The ride back to the ranch took them along familiar paths, past landmarks that held memories of their life together. As they crested the hill and the ranch came into view, Willa felt the same sense of coming home she had felt for 30 years. The house had been expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family when everyone visited. But the heart of it remained the room where Ashton had first brought her, where Martha had cared for her, where she had begun to heal and hope again. The remaining years of their lives passed in contentment. They grew older together, their bodies slowing but their minds and hearts remaining sharp and full of love. They saw grandchildren married and great-grandchildren born. The Xavier name became synonymous with integrity and community leadership throughout Idaho. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management, incorporating new methods while maintaining the values Ashton had instilled. In 1918, as the Great War ended and the world changed dramatically, Willa and Ashton celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary and 36th year since meeting. They were in their 60s now, a good age to reach in those times. They sat on their porch, the same porch where they had spent countless evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "You have any regrets?" Willa asked her husband, a question that sometimes comes with age. Ashton was quiet for a moment, considering. "Only one. I regret that I cannot live this life all over again with you. Once is not enough. I would like 1,000 lifetimes with you, each one as good as this one." Tears filled Willa's eyes. "That is the most beautiful thing you have ever said to me. It is the truth. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Willa Xavier. From the moment I picked you up in that market until this very moment, you have been my greatest joy. And you are mine. You saved me, Ashton. In every way possible, you saved me. We saved each other. That is what love does." They sat together as the stars came out, holding hands, comfortable in the silence that comes from decades of companionship. Inside the house, preparations were being made for another family gathering the next day. Outside, the ranch settled into night, cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in their stalls, the creek babbling its eternal song. This was home. This was family. This was love built across decades, strong and true and lasting. It had started with a desperate woman fainting in a market, and a determined rancher who refused to leave her to her fate. It had grown into something beautiful and enduring, a testament to the power of choosing love even when circumstances seemed impossible. As they finally went inside for the night, Ashton took Willa's hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her fingers gently. "Thank you for staying," he said softly. "Thank you for making me stay," she replied. "Best thing anyone ever did for me. Best thing I ever did was carrying you home that day and telling you that you were staying with me. Everything good in my life came from that choice. Everything good in my life came from you making it. They climbed the stairs together to the bedroom they had shared for over 3 decades, comfortable in their routines, secure in their love. Outside, the Idaho night stretched vast and beautiful over the Double X Ranch, covering the land that had witnessed their love story unfold across decades. It was a story that would be told to their great-grandchildren and beyond, a story of how love could find you in your darkest moment, how choosing compassion could change everything, how building a life together day by day could create something lasting and beautiful. It was a story of the American West, of hard work and determination, of family and community. But most of all, it was a love story. A story that began with a fainting woman and a rancher who carried her home and declared she was staying. A story that proved love could overcome any obstacle, heal any wound, and build a legacy that would last generations. And as Willa and Ashton Xavier fell asleep that night, surrounded by the life they had built together, they knew that their story was far from over. It would continue in their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. It would continue in the ranch that Thomas would pass to his children. It would continue in the values they had instilled and the love they had demonstrated every single day. The story that started in a market in Shoshone City, Idaho Territory in 1882, would echo through time, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the greatest blessings. That sometimes being saved means allowing someone to carry us when we cannot walk. That sometimes home is not a place but a person, and family is built not just through blood but through choice and commitment and unwavering love. Willa Xavier had fainted in a market, afraid and alone and certain her life was over. Ashton Xavier had carried her home and told her she was staying. And from that moment forward, their lives had been intertwined, creating a love story that would inspire generations to come, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, commitment, and choosing love even when the odds seem impossible. Their story was complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure in the land they had worked and the family they had raised, and the example they had set of what true love really means.